This is Gary Hine with Panhandle Research and Extension Center, and I will be discussing many of the scouting methods and how to establish thresholds for rangeland grasshopper management. The biggest decision that a rancher in managing grasshoppers will have to make will be whether or not a treatment is economically justified. There are a number of considerations that need to be made or need to be thought of when considering this. It's important, first of all, to be treating early enough before the adults are present. If adults are present, control is going to be very poor, and really the products that we use for rangeland grasshopper management are not going to be totally effective. For summer species, this means that by perhaps mid-June or at the very latest, late June, treatments need to be applied at that point in time. Another important consideration is where to be treating. Sometimes hatching beds can be identified where populations of grasshoppers are considerably higher in localized areas. If these localized areas can be identified, treatments can be applied very economically. Another situation where treatments can be very easily justified will be trying to treat areas of higher value. These can be lowland hay areas that the yield will be much higher in, the grasshoppers might have an impact in. But again, these areas will have lower thresholds, so we'll be able to tolerate fewer grasshoppers in these sites. In the end, the economic decision on treatment of rangeland is really going to come down to weighing cost versus return. The best applications for rangeland grasshopper control will result from utilizing the RATS program because of the economics of the application techniques. As far as establishing economic thresholds, the rangeland grasshopper thresholds will range from a very low number, probably as low as 8 per square yard, up to maybe 40 or more per square yard. There's a very wide range, and these thresholds will really depend on a number of different factors. These thresholds are affected by, first of all, the value of the forage present in a rangeland. If there's not a lot of forage there, the value of treating that area will be much reduced. Also, the damage potential of the grasshoppers, and this relates kind of to during the seasonal stage that you're at, treating early versus treating late. If you're treating much later, really you're not going to be saving that much by putting the treatments out. Cost of control is the next factor, and that can be a very significant factor. If treatments are going to be very expensive, it's going to be very difficult to justify treating rangeland. However, with the RATS program, treatment costs can be driven down very significantly, and the practicality of control can be met much more easily. Also, the effectiveness of control is a significant factor. If the control is not going to be very effective, really you're not going to get that much return from it. But if you're going to control the grasshoppers very well, perhaps for a single year, and the value of the treatment may actually be able to be seen over a couple years, that the effectiveness of the control will definitely impact the value of that treatment. Establishing these thresholds are very complicated and very difficult. There is some support for this, however. The CARMA software, C-A-R-M-A, has been developed for helping a rancher work through some of the complications of establishing these thresholds. The CARMA program has been verified or at least validated in Wyoming, established and validated in Wyoming, and also a new Nebraska version has been developed. The new version is available at http://karma.unk.edu, and this website will allow you to go and utilize this software to try to help establish the thresholds that you might want to use in your rangeland. Once we have a threshold established as to where we want to think about the potential for treatment, we have to think about how do we establish what the population is out there. Scouting procedures are extremely important and sometimes very difficult to really implement. Survey of rangeland really needs to be done to determine kind of the species in both and also the age composition of the grasshoppers. Sweep nets are really a very good, quick, representative sampling technique that can be used to try to establish these factors. We want to sample the age determination or the age distribution of the population primarily so that we can determine when it will be the best timing for treatment. Also, we can evaluate species composition. This can be fairly difficult in that grasshopper species are very difficult to identify on a species-to-species basis. But again, identifying and learning what some of the major species look like will help in this. Will help provide us some insight into what the population really is doing out there. From the standpoint of actually doing the sweep net sampling, when we use a sweep net, we want to sweep and make sure we aggressively sweep down into the grass with that sweep net. The best method to utilize for trying to establish a sample that we can use for these species and age compositions is to take 50 low, slow samples, basically 180-degree sweeps, fairly slow and very close to the ground, and then do 50 sweeps that are fairly high, again, still in the grass, but a little bit higher and fairly quickly, again, 180-degree sweeps. Once we have these 50 low, slow sweeps and the 50 high sweeps in the sweep net, you shake all the material down to the bottom of the sweep net and then try to dump that perhaps in a Ziploc plastic bag. You can then take that Ziploc bag and throw it in a freezer to kill the insects, and then you can go in and evaluate what is in that sample. So through that process, you can try to establish both the determination of what the species is throughout the rangeland, but also the age distribution of those grasshoppers. To establish the density of grasshoppers in the rangeland, it's going to be important to go out and take some visual estimates and to try to establish, again, how many grasshoppers we have per square yard. To do this, what we use is this, or what we recommend using is the square foot method. To utilize the square foot method, you have to select a point several feet away from you where you can identify a piece of grass or a weed or something, some landmark that you can pick up on. And then around that particular point, you want to visualize an area of 1 square foot. And then as you approach that point, you want to try to be watching for the grasshoppers. But again, selecting that area, trying to visualize the square foot area around that point is extremely critical to the accuracy of the method. As you walk toward that point that you've selected, you want to count any grasshoppers that you see that are in that area, in that square foot area, or that are jumping into that area or out of that area as you approach it. And as you get very close, you want to try to run your hand through that area to see if you can flush any grasshoppers from that square foot area. The numbers of grasshoppers that you get basically will be the number of grasshoppers that density, or the grasshopper density per square foot. If you repeat this 18 times and then divide the total there by 2, you'll get the number of grasshoppers per square yard. As you sample with this square foot method, you want to make sure that you sample at a multiple number of sites. You want to try to include varied vegetation across the areas that you sampled. Look at different slopes, north slope versus south slope, and try to separate your sampling sites by at least 50 to 75 feet, and then utilize kind of representative areas as you're looking through the rangeland and moving through the rangeland. Okay, once you've established the square yard density of the grasshoppers in a particular area, then you want to compare that back to the threshold that you established using the karma method or whatever method you have utilized to establish a threshold. If that grasshopper density exceeds the threshold, then treatment is probably warranted in that particular case.